Happy Sunday, everybody. Welcome to another episode of China Update, where I provide you with the most up-to-date political, economic, and geostrategic analysis on the world's #2 economy. My name is Tony. Let's jump in. We normally take Sundays off, but today I had to put up an extra episode because there has just been so much to cover from this week. So this episode is going up today, then we're back to regular episodes tomorrow on Monday. There's also another special episode going up for channel members and Patreon supporters. But with this episode here, we're going to cover the most salient points from this week, so we're ready for a new week of updates from tomorrow. According to an exclusive story published by US-based The Wall Street Journal yesterday, President-elect Donald Trump has expressed interest in traveling to China early in his presidency, a move that could help rebuild his strained relationship with Chinese leader General Secretary Xi Jinping. The two leaders, who have had fraught interactions over trade and tariffs, spoke by phone on Friday, marking their first conversation since the election. Trump has hinted that he might visit China within his first 100 days, although no official plans have been confirmed. The visit would come at a critical juncture, with Trump having promised steep tariffs on Chinese imports, potentially up to 60%. China, facing economic pressure, is eager to engage in negotiations to mitigate these tariffs. In addition to trade, the conversation between Trump and Xi touched on other issues such as fentanyl trafficking into the United States, TikTok, and the contentious Taiwan situation. Trump's remarks on social media suggested optimism about solving global problems with Xi, emphasizing a desire for cooperation. While Trump's inauguration is set for Monday, tomorrow, Xi has opted to send Vice President Han Zheng as his representative and not attend in person. Trump has been to China as president before. Trump's visit to Beijing in late 2017 came a few months after meeting Xi Jinping face-to-face for the first time at Mar-a-Lago, his Florida estate. He toured the Forbidden City and took in a Peking opera performance. In a social media post on Friday, Trump expressed, quote, "President Xi and I will do everything possible to make the world more peaceful and safe," end quote. Next up, and staying on the theme of US-China, there have been big developments in the US-China technology war from this week, specifically AI technology and advanced semiconductor restrictions, which Washington rolled out against China and others. On Wednesday, the US Department of Commerce issued 2 rules restricting PRC access to advanced semiconductors. One to update export controls on advanced computing semiconductors, and another that places additional entities in the PRC and Singapore on the entity list. The new measures call for chip producers like TSMC and Samsung Electronics Co. to step up their scrutiny and due diligence of customers, especially Chinese firms. That's an acknowledgement that advanced semiconductors are still making their way to China and Russia, including one incident where TSMC-made chips were secretly diverted to the blacklisted Huawei Technologies Co., which we covered at the time. According to the Commerce Department, the curbs impose sanctions on 16 Chinese companies, quote, due to their involvement in supporting or directly contributing to the development of advanced computing integrated circuits that further China's development of advanced weapon systems, weapons of mass destruction, and high-tech surveillance applications, and because these entities supply Chinese public security end users and pose a risk of diversion to Huawei. End quote. The US also added 11 firms to the entity list, 7 of whom are AI darling Zhipool subsidies. Quote, because these entities advance the People's Republic of China's military modernization through the development and integration of advanced artificial intelligence research. End quote. The US is also expanding licensing requirements on foundries, companies that manufacture chips for external customers, and packaging companies seeking to export advanced semiconductors. Meanwhile, the same day, Wednesday, the Netherlands introduced stricter export controls of their own, requiring ASML Holdings NV and other Dutch semiconductor equipment makers to apply for licenses with the Dutch government. Of course, Beijing is not happy with any of these new rules. China's Ministry of Commerce said that China firmly opposes the restrictions, expressing, quote, this action exemplifies the generalization of the concept of national security and the misuse of export controls and has severely hindered normal trade between countries, undermined market rules and international economic order, and affected global technological innovation. End quote. Now, these rules that were rolled out on Wednesday were actually building on the US Bureau of Industry and Security, BIS, introduction of the so-called Framework for International Intelligence Diffusion last week, a sweeping regulation that tightens export controls on AI chips and models, designed to curb exploitation of loopholes by bad actors while favoring US hyperscalers, Microsoft, Google, Amazon, etc. The framework categorizes countries into 3 tiers with varying access levels. Tier 1, the United States and 18 major allies granted the broadest access. Tier 2, countries with mixed US relations such as Singapore and Brazil face stricter caps, and Tier 3, arms-embargoed nations, including China, see the strictest restrictions. The structure imposes caps on GPU purchases, introduces a validated end-user VEU program to regulate entities eligible for chip imports, and establishes new controls on AI models. Training AI models requiring over 1 times 10 to the power of 26 flops, equivalent to twice Llama 405B, is restricted to Tier 1 nations. Closed-weight models of the scale are also barred from export. US-based AI and chip research firm SemiAnalysis, in an excellent piece this week, observed that the rules explicitly favor US hyperscalers, ensuring their dominance in the AI compute market. They also jeopardize the business models of Tier 2 data center operators, particularly in regions like Malaysia, India, Brazil, and the Middle East, where AI infrastructure investment may decline. Tier 3 nations, primarily China, face significant barriers to acquiring AI compute resources through both hardware and cloud services. Now, let's end this part on the AI restrictions and the tech war with some extracts from a piece by Ben Thompson at Stratechery called AI Diffusion Regulations, Closing Loopholes, the Objections. Quote, "What is missing is the closing of the loopholes in terms of providing semiconductor manufacturing equipment. That absence is particularly pressing in the light of these regulations, which provide a massive incentive for non-Tier 1 countries to find alternative sources of chips, which in the long run means China. Purely Chinese manufactured chips are not very competitive, however. Huawei's AI chip appears to have been manufactured by TSMC, while SMIC's 7nm chips are still very low volume and almost certainly very low yield, and made almost entirely with Western equipment. China's ability to make its own AI chips with its own equipment is still many years away, and any progress in that regard will likely be devoted entirely to China's own domestic demand. Still, this does lay the groundwork for a long-term decline of US chip dominance. Countries want chips, and they don't want to be told what to do with them. In this somewhat cataclysmic view of the world, there was value in the loopholes we talked about above. They were pressure valves of a sort. Sure, it was a pain for China to get GPUs on the black market, or to rent cloud GPUs, or get TSMC to make chips for a Huawei shell company, but all these failures were examples of China's benefiting from TSMC's chip-making prowess, which itself is dependent on Taiwan's unmarred existence. There is a world where the Commerce Department actually does close all of the loopholes, and the US gets AI on chips made in Taiwan, and China doesn't get anything. What then is the most rational move for China, particularly if they assume that AI will transform military capabilities?" End quote. Next up, we have one more development to cover, but just quickly, if you're getting some value from today's episode of China Update, I have a tremendous favor to ask. That is just to hit the like button, and if you're a regular viewer and you have not done so already, it's also a big help if you subscribe. Hitting subscribe and the bell notification button means that you'll be on top of these updates as they're released. It's also a massive help for the channel as it tells the algorithm to show this to new people. Patreon and Buy Me a Coffee links are also in the description below for those who want to help keep the channel financially sustainable. I rely primarily on your support, subscriber support, to keep going. In fact, I restrict sponsored features so that the majority of the support comes directly from individual subscribers. Thank you so much, everybody, for the ongoing support. Next up, and finally for today, as we discussed in yesterday's exploration of Friday's economic data, one of the few bright spots in the numbers was Chinese trade, specifically China's export performance. Earlier this week, we discussed China's record trade surplus of almost $1 trillion, and I explained why this isn't as positive as one would think. Well, the following day, Nobel Prize-winning economist Paul Krugman penned a piece called "China's Very Bad, No Good Trillion-Dollar Trade Surplus. It's a sign of weakness, not strength," in which he made several of the points I did, plus some others. We will end today's video by examining some of this article, which is worth a read in full for those who have the time. It's too long for us to unpack it all here, but we will touch on a few salient points, which we're now quoting directly. Last year, China ran history's first trillion-dollar trade surplus. Here's one of the many charts circling, this one from Bloomberg. Should China be celebrating its achievement? No. This surplus is a sign of weakness, not strength, a symptom of China's apparent inability to grapple with its fundamental economic problems. But China's trading partners won't be celebrating either. Giant Chinese trade surpluses create problems in other countries too, and China's attempt to export its problems, for that's what this amounts to, will meet a protectionist backlash. In fact, this would have happened even if Trump weren't about to take office. I often run into people who believe that a successful economy, one achieving rapid productivity growth and leading in cutting-edge technology, will both run big trade surpluses because it's so competitive and attract lots of foreign capital because it's such a good investment. But that arithmetic is impossible. In fact, when an economy surges past its rivals in productivity and technology, it usually does attract a lot of foreign investment, but that means that it runs a trade deficit, not a surplus. Conversely, when nations experience huge declines in trade deficits or increases in trade surpluses, it's usually because something bad has happened. The Chinese economy is having big problems adjusting to the prospect of slower economic growth. Extremely high rates of investment are no longer sustainable in the face of diminishing returns. Yet the government remains unwilling to do the obvious and promote higher consumer spending. Running big trade surpluses is one way to compensate for weak domestic demand, and China has been promoting big trade surpluses by weakening the value of its currency. Without question, China's big trade surplus is helping to keep its economy afloat, for now, but the weak yuan policy is almost certain to backfire, big time, because the rest of the world won't accept these surpluses for very long. Regional job loss in the face of import surges generate a powerful political backlash. So the rest of the world just isn't going to accept China's attempt to export its way out of policy failure. Trump would probably slap high tariffs on China no matter what. But that giant surplus means that Europe, the UK, and probably everyone else will do the same. But while the response to China's trillion-dollar surplus could and should be much smarter than I fear it will be, that surplus is bad news for China and a problem for everybody else. It's a sign of inability to grapple with the nation's problems, and it won't provide economic relief for very long. Here ends the direct quotes and today's episode of China Update. Thank you so much, everybody, for watching. Have a good Sunday. Have a restful weekend, and I'll see you for a new week of China Update tomorrow on Monday.